The African Continental Free Trade Area represents one of the most ambitious projects of economic integration in the world today. More than a legal framework, SFTA is a political, developmental project that seeks to redefine Africa's position in global trade. But as this agreement is advancing, questions arise about implementation, adaptability, and the strategic value in rapidly changing world. To explore these issues, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Faisal Ismail, who is the director of the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance. So, Dr. Faisal, thanks for joining us and welcome to this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here in Morocco.
Thank you. So, I would start, as you know, the SFTA has been into force since 2021. So from your perspective, are we moving along the trajectory that was envisioned initially? And what are the key milestones or setbacks right now when assessing the pace and direction of its progress?
Yes, thank you so much. So as you did say, this is a very ambitious agreement. It is ambitious because it covers trade in goods, trade in services. We have the first dispute settlement mechanism that has been established so we can solve our own problems on the continent. And then there are 5 other protocols, one on investment, one on competition, one on intellectual property, one on digital trade, and one on women and youth as well to ensure there's inclusivity. So very ambitious. And these all have been adopted by the presidents at various summits. And as you said, the agreement was only concluded in 2020, 2021. We began to implement, and really the trade began to start in across borders in 2022, somewhere October 22. So it's early days. It's early days. And the agreement is now in the process of being implemented. Countries have to understand it. We have to do a lot of training and capacity building at all levels. The general public, of course, have to be made more aware about it, the private sector in particular, but then also policymakers. This was negotiated by the negotiators, but they're not, all the policymakers. So back home in each of the capitals, people from the different ministries, different government departments and stakeholders, they need to understand the agreement and see the opportunity. So a lot of just preliminary work that has to be done before we really get down to getting to see the trade flowing between countries across the continent.
So perfect. So things are advancing. But given the global circumstances and this paradigm shift that we're witnessing right now, shaped by geopolitical blocks and fragmentation, do you think that we need to recalibrate our African trade agreement, or just we need to move ahead according to the initial plan?
Well, I think that the plan should really be one which is not the same as the way in which the theory tells us, or maybe the way in which the European Union evolved, but it has to be one which is adapted to the conditions of the African continent. Mm. We're a continent with 33 least developed countries. 16 of these countries are landlocked. Mm. 6 of them are small island developing states. So a lot of variation, different levels of development. Therefore, in my view, we have to develop an approach which I call developmental regionalism. Mm. It's an approach which takes into account this difference in levels of development of countries, but also the need for us to ensure that we have an approach which is built on the values of solidarity. Yeah. And what in Africa we call Ubuntu. Yes. That means we have to work together, collaborate, with each other, and understand the needs and interests of each other. And this, I believe, is the starting point for the African continent. And so, in my view, there are 4 areas where the agreement should focus. The first is the implementation of the agreement should focus. The first is the way in which we implement. It must address the variation in the levels of development. So the more stronger countries, the more economically developed, they must move faster. They must open their markets. They must contribute more. And I say this as a South African. South Africa is more diversified. Its economy is stronger than most countries in Africa, so it must contribute more. And so that's the first. The second is, trade will not take place in Africa without countries working together, collaborating to industrialize. Because most of us are commodity producers, and we produce a few significant commodities which we export to the rest of the world. But the most significant type of trade that we need in Africa that will take place is value-added manufacturers. But this will only happen if we collaborate to add value, because on our own, we don't have all the endowments. We don't have all the comparative advantages. And the third thing is we must work together to address the infrastructure gaps. So many of us, have infrastructure which is geared to export outside the continent, to Europe and the US, but not to each other.
Yeah.
So new infrastructure development and what we call now corridors, these development corridors are being built, but they can't be done without collaboration and joining forces and working together and sharing the risk, but also mobilizing finance. So that's the third thing. And finally, my view about this developmental regionalism approach is that we must address the issues of governance. We have to strengthen democratic governance in each of our countries and within the sub-regions, because if we don't, then very important projects which are now big opportunities. And you were saying there's a new world, yes, but this new world is one of new technologies.
Yeah.
It's a big opportunity because Africa has the critical minerals that can create and produce these new technologies, like, batteries for new electric vehicles. But if we don't get the governance right, if we don't collaborate and secure the right investment environment, we de-risk, our economies for new investors to come in and process these minerals, well, we're going to miss the opportunity. So therefore, governance is also important. So that's why I think that, the implementation of the AFCFTA can't just be about trade. It must be about all these 4 elements of, taking into account this asymmetry, addressing issues of industrialization across building regional value chains, working together on cross-border infrastructure, and strengthening democratic governance.
You said it, Doctor, quite well. So it's about collaboration at the domestic level. It's about finding our own way.
Yes.
Being solidarity. Solidarity should be the key word. So we have a common path, but with differentiated responsibilities.
Yes.
As you said, and you were addressing the issue of manufacturing in order to create this kind of interdependence and regional value chains in Africa. Right now, we're talking much more about the need of implementing a green industrial policy. So the manufacturing as we know it in the past is not any more sustainable. So we have to think about and put in place a new manufacturing sector backed by a green industrial policy. So how do you think Africa should think its green industrial policy, given the assets that you are addressing right now in terms of critical minerals and all the potential, the youth that we have?
Yes, thank you for mentioning it. This is a really important issue for Africa. So first, I think it must be said that Africa has contributed very little to these greenhouse gases, all the pollution in the atmosphere that is warming the earth. We are getting hotter and hotter every year because of all this fossil fuels and gases that we have been emitting into the atmosphere. Mostly this has been the work of Europe, the United States, and other countries that industrialize. So we have only made about 4% contribution to this, but we are being impacted the most. We are most vulnerable because our countries are poor, we don't have the infrastructure. So we have to take responsibility to address this. But of course, we need to find a way to do this with the contribution and the support of the international community. So having said that, I think the first issue is one of improving significantly the energy infrastructure. 600 million people in Africa don't have energy. Yet, Africa has the greatest potential in the world to build renewable energy infrastructure. We have the sun across, from Morocco to Cape Town. The sun shines, and we have this capacity to build renewable energy projects, but we also have big potential in hydroelectric power. So many countries already, like Ethiopia, like Kenya, they have really strong hydroelectric energy and also geothermal energy. So the Rift Valley, in Kenya. So we have this potential on the continent to close this gap, the energy gap, because we need the energy gap to build industries.
Yes.
And you need to do this in a way now which doesn't add more fossil fuel emissions and cause the earth to warm up more. So we have to then adopt more sustainable industrial strategies, different types of technologies, using renewable energy, and taking advantage of some of the new technologies that are there. They are, on the shelf. It's easy to access them, but we have to do this in a very deliberate way. So we have to industrialize, but we have to do it in a sustainable way. And this is what I call climate resilient regional industrialization. And it is possible for us to do it, and collaborating, working together as a continent, and negotiating with our partners in the north so that they also make their contribution, especially on the technology, because we don't have the capacity to recreate this technology. It's on the shelf, but we may need some transfer of the technology so that we also can contribute significantly to this process of climate resilience. And but at the same time, we can also develop. So our countries can, have clean energy to cook, and they can also increase their welfare and prosperity.
Perfect. So you mentioned the need to green our policy and to move along our economic trajectory into a more sustainable way. Another point that's been arising globally is the need to move green, but also to be to ensure our sovereignty on some aspects. And Africa actually, through the SFTAs, wants to expand into the e-commerce and digital trade protocols, as you said. So do you think, how can African countries protect their data sovereignty while encouraging also cross-border digital trade and innovation? And is it actually an issue to address and to talk about digital sovereignty within this context for Africa, as you say, that is lagging behind in terms of technology and needs to cooperate with global powers to appropriate and to adapt technology for their own sake?
This is a great challenge for the continent because, as you say, we are at the early stage of development, and we are still, in many countries, digitization is the early stage. And in many countries, telecommunications is still at a low level. There are countries where the percentage of people, like in Burundi, for example, who are, able to access the internet is very low. But there are some countries where they are already adopting these new technologies, the internet, and are digitizing. And here the challenge is how to ensure that we are able to move to the front of the technological frontier. So I know my children are already using AI technologies, at university and at home. But we need to ensure that the information is protected. Personal and private information is managed. There is, at the national level, security of governance, so cybersecurity instruments are put in place. And then we need to work together across the African continent to ensure that we just don't become the continent that has platforms from all over the world, whether that comes from the United States, Europe, from China. It can't be that Africa simply absorbs the technological platforms for e-commerce and for the digitization of our economy from outside the continent. We have to build our own networks as well, on the African continent, and we can do this by collaborating. The opportunity, of course, is that Africa will have the youngest population by the 2050. Our population will have doubled. At least more than a quarter of the world's population will be young, youthful, and African. So this is a big opportunity for us to start working now to training and building capacity of our young people in these new technologies, and then be also at the frontier of the technological shift, but increasingly also ensure that our countries also have the capacity to build our own technological platforms and trade with each other.
Thank you so much, Dr. Faisal Ismail, for accepting our invitation.
Pleasure. Thank you for being here.